Tara Juneau Painting Stuff. I'm Tara Juneau, and in this video, I'm going to be showing you how to make an acrylic underpainting, which we'll be going over in oil paint to create this still life of a brass elephant. We'll be starting this painting working from life, doing a drawing with graphite pencil, completing an underpainting using acrylic paint, and then we'll be painting over the acrylic underpainting using oil paint. The model for this still life was a brass elephant that was given to me by my father and some round glass marbles with a clear glass bulb suspended above the setup. I decided to use a landscape painting based on one by Thomas Gainsborough as a background. I've printed out a copy of the landscape painting and gridded it off to transfer it to my canvas, which is an 18 by 18 inch panel. And it's important if you're using acrylic as an underpainting that you're working on acrylic primed panel. You can't use an oil primed panel and put acrylic on it. You can't work with acrylic over top of oil. It will eventually flake off. I put a light coat of glazing medium over my drawing at this point and let it dry for a day. I decided to separate my drawing of the background from the elephant using a thin layer of glazing medium, and the reason that I'm doing this is so that I don't confuse the drawing. The lines of my background were throwing off the lines of my elephant, so I decided to separate that process. I've done a basic drawing here, and I am just going to be going over it with some acrylic. I'm using ivory black, burnt sienna, titanium white, and acrylic glazing medium. Starting with a wash of glazing medium mixed with burnt sienna, I cover the whole canvas to get rid of the white. Doing your underpainting in acrylic has three major benefits. It's low toxicity, so you can use it indoors with very little ventilation. It dries very quickly, and it mixes with water, which makes it very easy to use. I'm tightening and refining details in this phase, keeping all my tones in the middle range so that they will support the paint effects I want to create in my oil overpainting. A monochrome underpainting is often referred to as a grisaille. You basically make the painting that you would like to do in a monochrome or in a neutral color. This lets you work on the tones, meaning the degree of light or dark, as well as composition and drawing without having to deal with color. This simplifies the painting process by breaking the steps up, and this was a very popular technique with the old masters. It was very cost effective at a time when pigments were expensive and could be hard to come by. This pre-planning stage of doing a grisaille could be done in a cheaper pigment like a charcoal black, lead white, or an earth-based color like an ochre or sienna. Once the composition was satisfactory, they could paint over it with colors without wasting expensive pigments unnecessarily. The grisaille would also help give them control over their colors. The old masters had far fewer colors to work with, so they had to get the most out of each color that they had. They could increase the brightness by glazing it over a lighter tone. So if they had a yellow ochre, say, they could glaze it over white and get like a bright shimmering gold color. And they could also get different tones by mixing it with black or white. This is what the acrylic underpainting looked like before I painted over it with oil paint. I let the acrylic underpainting dry for 3 days. I am going to be working on the background today, so I'm hoping that my underpainting will do a lot of the work for me. I want to keep the brushwork loose, so I give the underpainting a very thin layer of walnut oil. Now this is gonna not only keep my paint a little bit more transparent, it's going to make the paint glide over really nicely. And now I have kind of a rough, lint-free cloth And I'm just gonna really rub this on. I love the smell of walnut oil. And I don't want oil on my elephant because I'm gonna be doing that a little bit later. So here is my palette. These colors here are dry. This one is Cobalt Titanite Blue, basically cerulean blue. My Mucky Gray, Azo Green, Yellow Ochre, Transparent Earth Yellow, Viridian, Ivory Black, Prussian Blue, Ultramarine Blue, Iron Violet, Burnt Sienna, Dioxazine Purple, Alizarin Crimson, Cadmium Red Medium, Cadmium Orange Medium, Cadmium Yellow Light, Titanium Buff, and 2 piles of Titanium White, one for mixing cools and one for mixing warms. Most of the greens in my background are a mixture of Prussian blue, yellow ochre, and titanium white. In Gainsborough's time, he would have had Prussian blue. Prussian blue was invented in the early 18th century, around 1706, and it was meant to replace some of the more costly blues like lapis lazuli. It's known that Gainsborough used a green that was a mixture of Prussian blue and yellow ochre called Prussian green, and he used this green extensively in his backgrounds and in landscapes. Elephant, I scrubbed transparent yellow earth directly onto the surface. This color is already quite oily, so I didn't want to introduce more oil. I'm adding yellow ochre for opacity, and in the darker sections I'm adding ivory black and iron violet with a bit of burnt sienna in the warmer tones. I'm putting a very thin layer of walnut oil onto my foreground underpainting to work into. This is what the first oil layer looks like. I'm going to be letting this dry and then going over it again to refine and tweak the tones, colors, and add more detail. I'm putting a very thin layer of walnut oil to work into. The technique I'm using here is called scumbling. I'm painting a lighter color over top of a darker base. This will give a cool, smoky looking effect, which will make my landscape appear to retreat from the foreground. I've cooled off some of these background colors. There's quite a bit of underpainting showing through, so I've gone through and I've just scumbled some violets and blues in there. I'm doing the same with the elephant. The refining stage of a painting always takes the most time. It can be really daunting. Sometimes I procrastinate for a long time before I can actually finish a painting. You really need to get in the right mindset to do all these details. I find the best solution to this is to just start. And if I don't feel like it, I just sit at the canvas and I get going, and sooner or later you just find hours have gone by and you've completed it. glad to be nearing the end of this painting. I've really enjoyed painting this elephant and the little marbles as well. I hope you enjoy this video and watching the process of starting a work with an acrylic underpainting. I want to thank you so much for joining me for this painting. I hope you get a chance to get out there and be creative.